Hi, everybody. I'm Director Kristi Whitfield, and you are watching our Building Back Better series. And today I am joined by Brandon Green. So I have been honored and really inspired by just industry experts and people who have reached out and wanted to know how they can pitch in and help. And Brandon Green is one of these amazing people who have pitched in and said, hey, how can we help? How can we pitch in? How can we share our expertise? Brandon is a DC-based entrepreneur and one of the co-founders, I think, of the Keller Williams Capital Partners. And he is with us today to just talk about weathering this crisis and sort of getting through the phases of building back better. Brandon, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Kristi, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be able to just share a little bit about what we're doing and how we're thinking through everything. So I appreciate you having me on today.
Yes. So tell us. I mean, especially real estate is something I have to say. I've been obsessed with real estate and with property values of real estate and how we are looking at sort of our businesses and our small business environment here. And I think as you and I were talking about this, I think people are in a state of panic. People have been in a state of panic. And as you think about kind of surviving, talk to me about how the type of advice that you're giving businesses these days.
Yes. Well, first I'll say this is very real for us. The real estate market in the district in terms of units and actual homes sold has gone down between 40 and 60% almost immediately. And while I think that the long-term view of the market is probably pretty good for people's values, the overall number of units that were sold constricted pretty quickly. And we have a number of offices across Washington, D.C. and staff and leases. And all of a sudden we saw, our revenue potentially going down by 80 or 90%. And it was a shock. And quite frankly, we did not have a pandemic plan. So, what I've been talking about with people is what we've been doing. And the first thing that we have been focused on the first 30 days, 45 days has been this idea of maximize liquidity, maximize our cash. Immediately we looked at every single expense that we could cut and we cut it. And some of those expenses we liked having around, to be honest, and they were not easy. And then you do that, and then you quickly get into some of the more difficult decisions like people, right? Staff, leases, long-term contracts. And we started by having a very honest and transparent conversation with our team about what's happening in the business and what we were facing and asked for everybody's help. And we were really inspired to see that in almost every case, the team rose to the occasion, and everybody has shared in the sacrifice of the last couple months as we've been dealing with what I would call phase one, which is sort of like the emergency repositioning of the business and right-sizing expenses and maximizing cash in the near term so that we're around to play the game on the long term. And so that's what we really have been focused on, is making sure that our expenses got below our revenue, which had gone down substantially, and knew that there was an urgency around that. And we focused an enormous amount of time and effort those first few weeks to make those adjustments.
And then how would you define phase two then for your firm?
And I appreciate you asking that, because this is what I'm starting to talk a lot about. Is I think most of us at this point have navigated through most of phase one, or we're coming to the end of phase one, which is really defined as a cash crunch, a crisis of expenses and revenue, and figured out at least to some degree a short-term approach to that. But now we're looking at phase two, and phase two is really where all of us need to look at our business models, first of all, and say, does the business model that was working in 2019, and maybe has worked for a long time, for us, we've been in the business since 2006 here in the district, does that now work going forward into 2020, 2021, and 2022? Or do we need to make some changes and modifications to that? Because I think what we have seen is we were on a path as a business community of innovation and change through technology and consumer behavior changes that was probably going to take 5 or 10 years to play out. A lot of this stuff was happening already, but we compressed that time frame. And all of a sudden, in 2 months, we saw what was probably going to happen in 5 years. And so it has brought to the forefront an urgent conversation as business owners, which is a real one, which is, does my business have a future? Does my business model have a future? And if not, how do I pivot that and how do I change that? And I think that really phase 2 is about answering the questions around that and then aligning all of the bigger expenses that we have as business owners, lease agreements, long-term contracts, with that new reality, whatever that is. And this summer, I believe, is a lot about rapid prototyping, like trying new things. We're seeing that across the district. Our business, we've seen this with restaurants a lot, right? Going from in-house dining to now offering delivery services. Does that stay? Like, what are people doing? So phase 2, Kristi, the way I'm thinking about it is, all right, we got through the first phase. We got some PPP dollars, DC small business grants. Like we locked a lot of that stuff down, but now we got to look at the longer term implications and begin making decisions about who's the team that builds us into the future. What does the space requirement need to look like? What are our margins based on new economics? And what does our customer want? And how do we adapt to that in a way that's compelling and profitable as a business?
So let me ask you this from a real estate perspective. As we think about social distancing, so this is something I've been obsessed with.
Yeah.
Small businesses sign leases.
Yes.
And those leases are based on costs, usually by square foot value. So in a social distancing environment, in the food service, with social distancing and the inability to pack people in, what do you see with the value of those leases?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the big challenges small businesses have faced over the last, let's call it 5 years, has been a rapid escalation of commercial lease prices. And for many, that already was unsustainable, as evidenced by how rapid people have gone out of business after just a couple months of disrupted income. Now, though, as we're looking at space, every business owner, every commercial landlord, everybody who's in real estate in all the different sectors are asking that question. And I think what we're going to see are a couple things. One is we're going to see this trend towards real big open spaces where everybody's like in a big old area. That's going to change. We're going to see a lot more like partitions and divisions. I think we're going to see a different approach to heating and air conditioning and ventilation and air quality and airflow. In the suburbs and some other areas where real estate is less expensive, we may see people literally take on larger square footage floor plans in order to accommodate social distancing. Or I think we're going to potentially see a divided workforce where, half of the people can come in to the office on Monday and the other half come in on Tuesday, but nobody can come in all at the same time because it won't always be practical for people to take large amounts of real estate to satisfy the entire workforce. So I think we'll see a lot of this virtual work that has been deployed as a result of the crisis stay. And I think that'll have an impact and probably trend particularly office space in terms of prices down. I mean, I think we'll see an entire new organization of commercial real estate on the office side and on the retail side too. Now, it's going to take some time for that to work out. I mean, I was on the call the other day with an investor who was like, hey, are there any good deals in commercial real estate? It's like, not yet, because those commercial real estate leases are often held by very large organizations and corporations, and sometimes all the way through real estate investment trusts that come back to our own retirement accounts. So these are complex financial instruments that hold these products, and it's going to take months to work through the legal and financial implications of what I think will be a broad-based resetting of commercial real estate pricing across the board.
So then what's the smartest pivot for a small business that's in one of these commercial leases?
The now thing that a small business needs to do in a commercial lease is begin a conversation with the landlord. So literally just today, we sent off several letters to our commercial landlords. We're a commercial landlord and a commercial tenant. So we're on both sides of the deal. So we sent off letters today with our landlords to begin the process of reconstituting that commercial lease. And I'll say that intuitively people think the way to approach that is, don't pay rent and sort of put a gun to the head of the commercial landlord. And I actually don't advise that. I actually think that if you can pay your rent, pay it. Because if you're a commercial landlord and you're deciding whether you're going to renegotiate with this tenant, the first question you have in your mind is that a viable business worth negotiating with? If I don't think they're viable and they don't have the cash to make it, I'm not going to go negotiate with them because I'm going to lose anyway in the end. So it's much better to negotiate with your commercial landlord from a position of having paid the full rent and come to the landlord with a specific numbers-based proposal. Indicate in a letter what has happened to your business using numbers, attach your profit and loss statement as evidence potentially, tell them how much your revenue has been impacted, and tell them what your plan is for the future to remain in business, and accompany that with an ask to reduce the rent. And then begin what you have to be aware of will be a multi-dimensional chess game over the coming weeks and months in order to get to a place where you've got a new lease. So that's why I want people to start that now, is it could take several months to reposition a commercial lease to a place where you've got a better win-win, and time is ticking. And that's a lot about what's the next phases of this crisis is dealing with the longer term, more complex contractual agreements and obligations that we have to reposition those as our businesses have been repositioned as a result of the crisis.
What is your opinion? A few people have suggested to me percentage of sales-based rent. Do you have an opinion about that?
So I personally don't like that, only because I want the entrepreneur to handle or to have the upside from the benefit of running a more and more profitable business over time. It can be a good way to get into a commercial lease, maybe for the first couple years or so, but I like the entrepreneur to have the control over the business. And the problem with tagging your rent to your gross revenue or any of your sales is you're never able to reduce your rent as a percentage of your overall revenue, because it essentially tracks along with it. So you're never able to really get a better and better profit margin, which is part of the benefit of a growing business if you do it well and do it right. So I'm not a big fan of that. I know a lot of restaurants in particular use those configurations. They're common in that space because they benefit the landlord, right? So I'm more of a believer in let the entrepreneur take the win from the growth of that operating business, which is an everyday in the trenches difficult thing to do.
So, all right, Brendan, we're almost out of time. I cannot believe how quickly this has gone.
Right.
Any parting words of wisdom for the people who are listening?
Yeah. So what I am saying to my team and to as many people as we can talk to is we have to remember that we've just gone through round one of what will be multiple rounds, and there will be an ebb and flow and a stop and start to this. And we need to be managing ourselves personally, like put our oxygen mask on first as business owners and entrepreneurs, like self-care, right? And we need to be managing to some of these cycles. I think we're going to have a period of time where we're going to have a little bit of a breather this spring and this summer. Hopefully the virus count goes down. Some of the businesses are going to reopen, and it's going to feel a little bit like a deep breath. Let's take that opportunity to prepare better for the fall and the winter so that when this inevitably comes back around, at least to some degree, we're in a better position, a position where we've secured our business model for the future, and we've begun the process of renegotiating some of these longer term contracts. So think now about the fall and the winter so that by 12 months from now, you've repositioned entirely and you're on a great path for renewed profitability.
Well, I think that's some sage advice. Again, I really just want to thank you for just being willing to take a little time. I think it bears repeating that it's wonderful that businesses just want to reach out and lend a helping hand to other businesses. And I think that It speaks to what Mayor Bowser is said again and again, which is that we are all in this together and that we will get through this together. I think that we are figuring a lot of things out as we go along, and it speaks to the testimony and the testament to the entrepreneurial spirit that you're, just willing to lend a little experience to the conversation. So thank you for your time and your expertise.
Pleasure.
And we'll just keep these conversations going.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Everybody, I'm Kristi Whitfield. I'm the Director of the Department of Small and Local Business Development, and this is part of our Building Back Better series. Thanks for listening.